Hello and welcome to TelecomTV's live Q&A program on next generation IMS. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and for the next hour or so, we are broadcasting live and waiting to hear from you with your questions to our panel of guests. Now, NIMS is a project to modernise Deutsche Telekom's IMS service and deliver a foundation for its digital transformation to support its fixed-line voice customers. The goal was to achieve fully automated and disaggregated production of complex core services. As part of our in-depth NIMS coverage, we've held 2 roundtable discussions and produced a series of interviews. Now, though, it's the chance for you to participate. So send us your questions about the NIMS project and we'll look to answer as many as we can in the time that we have today. And I'm delighted to introduce our guests, many of whom took part in the earlier panel discussions and interviews. So joining us today are Christoph Hilz, who is Group Head, Voice and Messaging, DevOps at Deutsche Telekom. Matthias Kokot, who is VP Product Management at Juniper Networks. Rolf Eberhardt, who is Head of Orchestration, CMS at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Azhar Sayeed, who's Chief Architect, Service Provider at Red Hat. Brandon Larson, SVP and GM Multimedia Business Unit at Mavenir. Paul Brittain, VP Product Strategy at Metaswitch. And Charles Ferland, who is VP and GM Edge Computing and Telco at Lenovo. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. Thank you for taking part in this live discussion. Now, as well as answering audience questions, we're also going to be discussing the key aspects of the project. It's a chance for the NIMS vendor partners to put their questions direct to Deutsche Telekom. So let's start things off, and it's a question for all of the partners now. We've received several around a similar theme, and the question is, has the experience of being a Deutsche Telekom co-creation partner helped with other collaboration activities or influenced your thinking in terms of new ecosystem collaboration? Matthias, perhaps I could start with your views.
Absolutely. Yes, it has influenced us and it has benefited us. And I would say when Christoph and I, when we sat down, I believe it's probably a couple of years ago in Sunnyvale, and we discussed what's needed for the NIMS project to be successful. We thought the co-creation program was one foundational aspect of what needed to be kicked off, because we all know the new ecosystem, where, a lot of the things are disaggregated, basically required a new way of collaborating between, the partners. And I would say I'm really happy, that we put together the program, we put together the governance, and I would say over the years of working with, all the partners, I think it has benefited, Juniper, it has benefited, I believe, the other partners as well. And I think it has also benefited the industry in general. So I would say, definitely yes, there.
Thank you, Matthias. Well, let's hear what our other partners think. Rolf, how has the whole project helped you in terms of your thinking about collaboration?
Yeah, we've been doing collaboration with other telcos as well. What was clearly novel for the NIMS project, it was the level of involvement, the entire structure of the customer, the way CI/CD was being brought in, and also the way the project is thinking ahead into a complete end-to-end enterprise strategy. There you clearly see proper German engineering in the approach they're taking.
Very good to hear. Thank you, Rolf. Azhar, what were your opinions and thoughts of the whole project and working together?
Well, certainly it provided us a huge benefit in terms of understanding what DT's requirements were and how we could actually pre-integrate and build a solution with a partner like Juniper, right, to bring to the table. What it did was it provided a very high degree of automation, a higher quality of solution, right? That was really fundamental in terms of building a successful implementation for a complex project like NIMS. We have a very strong partner ecosystem already, but this collaboration model with DT and partners allowed us to do things beforehand and create what is called as a distributed CI model, distributed continuous integration model with our partners, so that our partners could get pre-GA code, look at that, integrate it, and then build automation into it and then deliver it. So that's what really helped, in my personal opinion, the overall project. Because one of the key examples, for example, is that software update process was reduced by 50% in terms of the time needed for it to be rolled out in that particular release. So lots and lots of benefits. I think we've learned a lot through this process, and we continue to, adopt some of the best practices from this.
Thanks, Azhar. And Brendan, what was your experience of the co-creation work with Deutsche Telekom?
Well, it's definitely influenced our way of thinking and how we interact with others. I mean, we've highlighted the success of this collaborative model to other vendors we work with in the ecosystem, as well as our customers. And, as you know, the telco industry has been moving toward IT technologies for over a decade now. And the desire for automation is not new, but what is challenging for others, we typically find is that making IT technologies work with telco paradigms, there's just a lot of problems to be solved and innovations need to solve them. And what we really saw in this project is that innovation can be realized by doing two things. One is the willingness to challenge the existing paradigms or status quo, whether it be related to organization, processes, or team skill set. And by removing anything that could be a potential friction point, innovation is given a chance to thrive. And the second was fostering the proper mindset, across the broader team, focusing everyone on achieving, a common business and operational goal, instilling brutal automation as a way of life, leveraging the collective wisdom of the team through the collaborative process. And when we talk to others about it, it really makes sense to them, but I also sense there's a lot of human inertia out there in terms of people doing the things that, the way they're used to doing it. And change always brings a level of discomfort. So, that could remain a bit of a challenge. But everybody, is really excited about the idea when we talk to them about it.
Good to hear. Thank you, Brandon. And Paul, what about you? What about your thoughts from the experience of working as a co-creation partner?
Well, thank you, Guy, and thank you, Christoph. It was a fantastic experience working with all the co-creation partners. A uniquely inclusive project compared with how many in this industry work. I think driven for two reasons. Firstly, a very clear vision coming from Christoph and team on exactly what they wanted to achieve, but also an openness to new ideas and a drive to further improvements in the future. And then that inspired all the partners in the co-creation effort. So all the sponsoring organizations and the different engineers and technologists who contributed to it, to give some really good and very open feedback. And it was a very enjoyable process, but also created some unique insights and some cross-industry relationships that I think will be really useful for the telco community as a whole, as well as further refinement of the NIMS project. It was good fun, in short.
It's got to be fun as well. Thank you very much, Paul. And Charles, last but by no means least, what were your experiences of working on the co-creation project? And has it influenced the way you think about future ecosystem collaboration?
Thank you. It's a good question. It certainly did. I want to echo some of the comments my colleagues did on it previously, but there's a say that experience teaches. And that was a big experience, this project. Just the real use cases that we had to address versus hypothetical use cases or theoretical environment, this made it real and very concrete. I would say perhaps the strong focus on how do we operationalize that, how do we handle the hardware and the software as one environment that has to operate successfully, was probably one of the best learning that we had and something that we translate into other projects as well.
Thank you very much, Charles, and lots of positive feedback there for Christoph. Let's move on to our next question, and let's start with one of our partner questions. And Brandon, I believe you've got a question for Christoph.
I do, guys. Thank you. Christoph, so, having a clear vision of what you want to achieve at the onset of the project was really key to keeping everyone aligned and focused throughout the project. So what was the inspiration for the vision, and what process did you take to take that vision and define the specifics in the 3210 vision?
I think the 3210 vision was at the end the result of a lot of pain and headaches which we had while doing the operation and also the engineering of our current ecosystem, which was purely based on physical network functions. And for us, it was clear that we have to do something. And at the end, every figure is at the end representative or representing one of these pain points. So at the end, we said we need to change that, and therefore we try to define a clear target. At the end, you call it probably moonshot or North Star, where we said, hey, at the end, we want to achieve that. And I think we all know that, let's say, we have to be faster, and we are in the middle of a complete change of the telco industry, because we are in the middle of a big transformation journey. And therefore, that was at the end the motivation for such kind of absolutely challenging vision. That's the answer.
Thank you, Christoph, and thank you, Brandon, for the question there. We've got a question just come in here from our audience, and I think we'll probably direct this one back to you, Christoph. And the question is, we hear that CI/CD pipelines are very difficult for telcos to implement. How was your experience of this? And as I say, let's start with you, Christoph, and perhaps we could then maybe open it up to our other guests.
Okay, so first of all, I think I have my special interpretation of CI/CD, which is probably not a famous one, because for me CI/CD, or for some people CI/CD is one part of the whole ecosystem. For me, the CI/CD or the pipeline which we need is more, and CI/CD is just a puzzle piece inside. So while having all these pain points and seeing how slow we are in a lot of these processes, and I always had that idea of that central spider of an automation framework where you check in your software, it will be fully automatically deployed to the lab environment. We will automatically start the validation tests and so on up to rollout is completed. And this topic I was really looking for in a very early stage already, end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And I asked myself, hey, is that somewhere available already on the market? Do we have some other tier one operator where we can learn from? And my management team then said, hey, Christoph, then look around. And I had really the chance of visiting a lot of other tier one operator around the globe. And the summary was, no, it's not existing. And the echo which I got is, hey, Christoph, that would be cool. We also would like to have something like that. And that was at the end for us then the starting point in saying, okay, if that's not existing, waiting is not an option till someone will invent it. So we have to do that by our own. And that was at the end the story, how that, let's say, bigger implementation of CI/CD was born.
Thank you, Christoph. And I think Azhar probably would like to come in and have some comments on this question as well. Azhar?
Thank you, Guy. Absolutely. I think one of the key points that Christoph mentioned is automation. Just having a CI/CD or distributed CI/CD is not sufficient to you without automation. If you have automation built with that particular CI/CD pipeline, then you can actually achieve what you really want to achieve. And I agree with Christoph that when he started to investigate this in 2017, there was probably nobody at that time doing this. But now I'm happy to report to Christoph that not only DT has done it, but there are also a couple of other providers who have followed suit in this domain in terms of how to implement a complete CI/CD infrastructure and do the pre-integration, do the testing, and then put it into production by just flipping a switch at the end. So it's being done. It's done. Yes, it is difficult, but you have to adapt your processes to it. And automation is absolutely critical to make it happen.
Great. Good to hear that we're getting there. Any of our other guests got any feedback on this question? If not, we'll move on to our next audience question because we have a lot of them coming in. Well, let's look at our next audience question in that case. The question is, well, actually, the question is directed to you, Paul. And the question is, you mentioned earlier, I presume in your earlier the interview and the panel discussion we did earlier, you mentioned taking ideas into NIMS from the hyperscalers. Going forwards, do you also see more direct collaboration between telco and hyperscalers?
Yeah, absolutely, Guy. And this goes back to what Christoph was just referring to in terms of automation. The hyperscale world concentrates on achieving economic benefits out of automation, and very good at that, and also very good at building large scale, the clues in the name. In contrast, the telco world has a unique viewpoint on what reliability means. It's not just a simple definition of 5 nines. It's all about controlling the blast radius that can affect reliability of service, because we all have a total dependence on networks being there the whole time, whether it's working from home during pandemic or in a natural disaster scenario. We still need the networks to be there in a way that is more fundamental and unavoidable than however important you view a particular website or business application. Because ultimately it's about people's lives and houses and the like. So the combination of taking that automation technology and the sheer speed of rollout that your hyperscalers concentrate on, and combine that with the unique telco DNA on what has to be sort of a more survivable nature of reliability. It's not just trying to build a system that cannot fail. It's saying systems will fail. How do I make sure that the whole thing doesn't go down at once, even if bad things happen that I shouldn't have expected? So the combination of those two, I think, will be a very powerful transformation in the industry. So bring the telco DNA, plus obviously the access networks and the edge sites, combine that with the cloud technology, some of which is already incorporated in ideas in what the telco world generally and NIMS have already done, but there'll be more that can be adopted from the hyperscalers to give a ubiquitous global telco cloud infrastructure that gives a lot better survivability and better economics going forwards for both halves of that hybrid, the telcos themselves and also the hyperscalers and all the people who want to build edge applications on top of those networks. So I think there's plenty of scope for more partnership and more collaboration.
Thank you, Paul. Any of other guests want to come in on the what we can take or adopt and adapt from the cloud hyperscalers technology-wise? If not, then let us move on. And Brandon, I believe you've got another question for Christoph.
Yes, thank you. So Christoph, this project was the first of its kind. There was no blueprint to follow, and no one could really be certain how the journey would end. So there was a fair amount of uncertainty and risk when you decided to take this step. So for other operators considering taking a similar direction with automation, what do you feel were the compelling drivers that made it necessary to take this bold step at this time?
I think it's a very good question, because at the end I thought about that question also when we started, whether this is a good idea or not. Because of course there is and was a huge risk behind. But at the end, I think everyone needs to ask himself whether he's happy at the moment. So are you happy with your R&D times you see? Are you happy with your validation times you see? Are you happy with your rollout times which you see in the production network? And we weren't. So and of course now you can wait till someone else will help you and give you a tool which will where you get rid of all of these problems, or you say no, it's on us, and we are engineers in Deutsche Telekom, and we have good engineers and we have ambition, and that was at the end then for us the time where we said we are brave guys, we know what we want, and we have a clear target picture, and we will go for that risk because we know if we make it happen, it will massively change the way, and it will help Deutsche Telekom, not just for the fixed voice part, but also for future core services.
Thank you, Christoph, and thanks again, Brandon, for the question there. A reminder to our audience, please send in your questions as soon as you can. Don't leave it too late, because the sooner you send them in, the better the chance that we can try and answer them. Which does bring us nicely to our next audience question. And the question is, will Deutsche Telekom take the experience of DevOps in NIMS and apply it throughout the organization? One for you there, I guess, Christoph.
I think I need to split. A cool question. I need to split it because I think there are two things in. I think one is, of course, that the DevOps approach, and I think we need to be honest because DevOps in Deutsche Telekom was not created due to NIMS. So the NIMS started in a very early stage where we were in parallel already discussing for the whole technology organization to flip into the DevOps model. And that was definitely something where also my CTO, Walter Goldenitz, was a real core believer. And I think he's absolutely right, because that's the only way how we can tackle all the challenges in our organization. So we had, on the one hand, the organizational change in DevOps, where we also changed the way inside the NIMS project, because we had a big reorganization. We changed the way to agile working. We started as a project, and then we now get more and more transformation into our squad work and sprints. So that was something where we had two things in parallel: technology transformation driven by NIMS, but also organizational changes within our organization, and therefore also touching my team and also the NIMS colleagues. But on the other hand, there is a second half of the question, is transforming the DevOps thinking and also the technical process architecture topics and tools. And there I can say clear yes. So we have a lot of topics which we created, a lot of thinkings in the processes and in the way how the software should run through that pipeline. And that's not specific for voice. So that is definitely something where, with future projects which we already started, we will definitely gain a lot from NIMS in our also daily working as a DevOps team.
Great, thanks very much, Christoph. Yes, that's so important. The processes and methodologies are so important when we talk DevOps in telcos. Well, if no one wants to pick up on DevOps, we'll move. Yes, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add to that. I mean, what Christoph said was, the people and process side of transformation like NIMS is so important. But actually, I think where Christoph and his team can help really drive the rest of Deutsche Telekom is by being a successful example. And beyond DT in the industry as well, because one of the difficulties of putting in such a radical, sort of new approach to building telco networks is the natural suspicion of operational teams towards the new. So having a great example of success in the new, I think, will help the whole industry, but certainly DT themselves.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, we've got Mathias.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Paul just said. It's there's always a tendency basically to look at change at something that is threatening, right? And so having actually Christoph and team make it a successful project in Deutsche Telekom, and as well as basically pushing that message across in the telco industry is important. Maybe going back to DevOps, when we started the project, obviously it was I would call it revolutionary in scope, and so we didn't have all the answers to, let's say, all the questions either. So I think DevOps actually was the only way to get it done, and to get it done successfully, basically in a very agile working in a very agile way. And then coming back to a topic that we touched on earlier in terms of the CI/CD pipelines and the automation. I also believe the automation combined with DevOps was the only way to get it done. And Paul alluded to this earlier. It's not just the technology that's important, but it's also the process changes. It's a transformational project that touches people, skill set, processes, and the technology, right? And combining all aspects, of it and dealing with all of them, that really makes it successful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthias. Rolf.
Yeah, just rang a bell. What I found interesting in the project was that in the team, the DTAC team, and they were willing to accept changes. We had started off with a whole set of use cases, was a huge list, and then during the project, you started realizing, hey, there are some things which we need to change, which we need to improve, and the team was given the flexibility to adapt and to improve while they were moving along. Sort of after all the beautiful words around CI/CD and DevOps, I think this was really one of the practical essences coming out of the project, allowing teams to be flexible and to adopt and to make mistakes.
Thank you, Rolf. Christoph, please.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I think the discussion around DevOps, because I think that, and I'm absolutely with Matthias, I think DevOps without changing the processes doesn't help. So let's say when we started the DevOps, my, let's say, naive thinking was, okay, we have a planning, we have an engineering, we have a validation department in the past. We now merge the colleagues and we have some synergies in between. I think that's for the internal view, that's absolutely right. But at the end, it doesn't help you then if you add agile methodologies of working inside the team to be more speedy. If you're interworking with the supplier, you get each half a year a release. That doesn't help. So at the end, you also need to see, okay, if we went into DevOps model and you have a lot of horsepower now inside your team, the question is, how do you change the interface to your supplier that you gain and benefit something out of that? So the whole power out of the DevOps is just there, and you have a big lever if you really also change the processes in the interworking with your R&D partner. Sometimes we also create the code by our own, then we are our own customer. But let's say in the majority of the case, we work together with suppliers, and there also we get the code and the software from the suppliers, and we also need to change the way of working there. So at the end, it was not just changing Deutsche Telekom, it was also changing the interfaces towards the suppliers. And that's what we understood under the umbrella of technical process architecture, which doesn't start with the first DT guy in the chain. It starts already with the specification up to the coding, and when we get the code in our labs. So we completely changed that process.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for those answers. That was a good question. Great set of answers. Leads us to our next audience question, because they are coming in here. Rolf, let me ask you this one first. Is the orchestration architecture DTAG specific?
Yeah, it definitely is not DTAG specific. We're using Mano and service orchestration, and I think what's been special about the project in NIMS was that the interlock with the entire CI/CD and the automation coming from the infrastructure level is well combined with the automation to be used on operations level and on the application business logic level. And this is really one of the key changes if you compare it with other architectures which we've been seeing. If there are other specific elements around it, they're related to functions which each operator would be requiring due to network architecture or due to the specific business functions which they want to have or network elements. But at the end of the day, it's all about configuring the end-to-end automation in such a way that it fits as easily as possible into the customer's environment.
Great. Thank you, Rolf. And unless anyone wants to comment on that as well, then let's move on to our next audience question. This is a good question. This question gets to the heart of the matter, really. It's nice and simple. So I think this is a question for all our vendors here. What were your key takeaways from this NIMS project? Nice and simple there. What were your key takeaways? Perhaps you could all volunteer some brief answers. Matthias, maybe we should start with you.
I mean, I would say there were many, takeaways, from the project. And, we already touched on, some of them here in the discussions. The first one is, it's a disaggregation project. So working actually, together in an agile way is just, key of, making it happen. I would say that was the first one. The second one is not everything can be planned for. So there will always be, some surprises that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with basically in the spirit of, I can make it happen. We can make it happen. And I think Paul alluded to, this earlier. Making some mistakes, is okay. You have to learn, from them. Hopefully, you don't repeat them, for a second or a third time. I would say one of the other key learnings is, lifecycle management is hard, but it needs to be, done, and it needs to be, dealt with. This is again where, the automation, and I think Christoph calls it actually the brutal, automation, basically, comes in. The only way to manage the, the life cycle of, let's say, a deployment such a Deutsche Telekom NIMS, service is, through, full automation. So some of the key learnings, what we, started out the discussion with, co-creation. I think co-creation for another project like NIMS, I would say I would definitely make it, part of, the building blocks, there.
Thank you, Matthias. And Charles, what about you? What were your key takeaways from this project?
I think the main one is probably that it proved the industry that it can be done, right? For a very long time, we looked at these services being delivered on closed hardware, running proprietary software, in a very monolithic environment. And here we are proving that we can run mission critical network services such as voice on a completely disaggregated model, right? So a lot of the time we talked about it, a lot of the time we dreamt about it, but I think here is a reality at a very large scales with millions of users using this platform in order to deliver a more agile and better services to the end user. So I think that my key takeaway, as Mathias mentioned, was that the life cycle end-to-end life cycle has to be handled, and it can be handled. And this project is actually proving that it's possible to do this today.
Great, thank you, Charles. And Azhar, what about your key takeaways?
Yeah, I think two key takeaways from a Red Hat point of view, right? One is that the value of pre-integration. I think pre-integrating with our partners, components, software and hardware components, and then bringing them in becomes incredibly important, because if you want to shorten that cycle in terms of integration, testing, and deployment. Another key takeaway, in our opinion, is automation. Through automation, a lot can be achieved. And this project is absolutely a proof point in terms of how the timelines were reduced in terms of from concept to deployment, and how automation was applied, as we spoke about it earlier, in terms of the distributed CI model, and how automation played such a critical role in terms of doing the pre-integration, doing the validation, and then the actual deployment, and then customer onboarding on top of that. So end-to-end brutal automation. I love the word Christoph coined, which is brutal automation, and how that was really possible and how we were able to achieve that.
Thank you, Azhar. It is a good term. Anybody else want to mention their Paul? Yes, your key takeaways?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that even with all this automation and a very collaborative model, building a distributed network of this complexity is still hard, quite surprisingly hard. As Matthias and Charles and others have said, things go wrong, you have to sort them out. And the other key takeaway is we all like to think we're smart. You know what? There's a lot of really smart people out in all those other companies as well. Put them together in a nice open environment, which is what the co-creation approach achieved. That's when you can really make these cheerleader projects for the industry come together and deliver the results that Christoph was looking for.
Great, thank you, Paul. And Brendan?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest takeaway from being involved in this project is that as an industry, when it comes to transforming with cloud and automation, we really need to change the way we do things. I would say there are three aspects to the project which really stand out because one, they were instrumental to the project's success, and two, is very different from the way we normally operate. That first aspect was, coming from an application vendor perspective, was that instead of just being given a list of technical requirements to fulfill and go off to your room and work on it, we were actually given a vision of what success looked like in terms of meeting tangible business and operational goals. And this helps application providers, gives us valuable context in our solution development. So as a vendor, you normally don't get that clarity of purpose, and having it helps us. And we were able to better hit the target. And the second aspect was the openness to solution ideas, which my colleagues on the call had mentioned before. So why that's important is our engineers weren't just fulfilling the technical requirements that I just mentioned. They were actually involved in solving these new challenges. And that really motivates our engineering staff. So we definitely got a lot of benefit out of that. And the third aspect was the importance of collaboration across the ecosystems of partners, which everybody's mentioned today. Because unlike a network technology project, which is defined by standards bodies, and you got interfaces that you can fit together, there was no one blueprint for all of us to follow. So coming up with solutions that were going to work end to end, and that just wasn't going to be possible if we continue to work in silos. So, what we learned is it's all about taking a completely different approach to solving the cloud and automation problem.
Thank you, Brendan. And Rolf?
Two takeaways. First of all, standards, they help us be faster in pre-integration or moving forwards, and then adopting to change when it comes from multiple systems. So a very pleasant way of helping a CI/CD to actually become reality is by having good standards, machine readable, and then moving through them, number one. Number two, hey, we survived the COVID crisis last year. And, if you think about it, it was like until February, we were having regular flights into Germany. And then all of a sudden it was everybody at home and we didn't notice it. It's proof, practical proof that if you have a good automation environment, a good collaboration infrastructure, you can actually do complicated projects in a very distributed manner. And that's a proof in the pudding. Definitely good.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for those key takeaways of the NIMS project. Now, we've got a question in from an audience member. It's related to what's just been said. Here's the question. Are there any learnings or findings that came up during the NIMS project which could be brought to standardization or other communities? Is there an avenue to take what we've learned from this NIMS project into perhaps the standardization and or the other maybe open communities? Anybody would like to have a word or two about that?
Well, there's a lot of activity going on in there's a lot of activity going on in ETSI ZSM, for example, which is being heavily driven by Deutsche Telekom as well, and a lot of the ideas and concepts are going into that body. That's definitely one thing I've been seeing for sure.
Thank you, Rolf. Thank you indeed. A reminder to our audience, please, keep sending the questions in because we still have some time. There are some great questions coming in. In fact, I'm going to ask one right now. This one for Christoph. It says, you mentioned you wanted to reduce release cycles and other KPIs when you started the project, but what were the key KPIs that you were monitoring? And when you compare them then to know what improvements have been achieved?
So that's a great question. So I think we need to define when it comes to release cycles, what are we talking about? So are we talking about a system or a platform release cycle? So let's say when we started in the fixed network part, it closely took us 1 year really to run a complete upgrade of several different software system types through our validation chain. Because you had 7 different system types, you get the software, you need to check it in, you need to do all this regression tests, then probably you find a bug, then you need to wait for the bug fix, you get the next release, you onboard it again. And till then, the last system you have already for pilot, it sometimes really took a year. And especially then also this validation time, if you have to not do it once because you have find bugs, you have to do it more than once, the automation then of course kicks in, or it doesn't kick in if you don't have it. And at the end, that was when I started, we were in a 3-digit unit of days for this regression. And when I came, I said, guys, we need to do that in 20 days. 20 days regression test for one system type. And they all thought, Christoph, something is wrong with you. And at the end, I think we came up in PNF then with 25 days, and I regretted not have mentioned 15 days because then we would have probably ended up with 20. And then I said, hey, that 20 days, that will not help us, because if I get release cycles each, let's say 2 weeks, and I know the suppliers are doing cycles each week, but probably drop each second week, we will stuck because we will queue. There will be huge queue. So I said, guys, we need to change that. And that was the reason why we put that moonshot out, saying 2 days, which is on the 3-2-1-0, the 2 days for the whole run through the pipeline till the software is in live. So you check in the software, it's a new software version, it will be automatically onboarded. You run the full regression test, you go in Canary, you continue the rollout, and you are done in 2 days. And that's our KPI delta. And just have in mind, the 20 days before was just the validation. We not talked about the rollout, which is coming on top. And the 2 days combine these 20 days, and of course the rollout, which also really depends on the number of systems we have outside. And as you might assume, as Deutsche Telekom, we have more than one box outside. So we have a huge deployment outside, and we have to do a lot of night shifts to upgrade these things. So at the end, in a nutshell, these are our KPIs, the 2 and the 1. So I'm not looking just for the validation and the KPI for the rollout. I'm interested in the whole run through this brutal automation pipeline, and therefore we have these KPIs 2 for the software run through the whole chain, and 1 for bug fixes.
Great, thank you very much for that, Christoph. Any of our partners want to comment on the KPI process, or please, yeah, Mathias.
I would say, Christoph calls it a moonshot, but I would say in hindsight, actually, it was, excellent to have, this moonshot, because it truly, provided a true north, for us. This is what, Christoph and Deutsche Telekom wanted to see, from us. Was it challenging? Definitely was challenging. It's still, challenging, there, but I think it was a good guidance, where we needed to be in order to be, successful. And then, coming back to, the 3-2-1-0 and the lifecycle management, I think it's also a testament for, this group here and my, esteemed, colleagues, that we actually get together and, address, some of the shortcomings, that we have seen, there in order to get closer to, the moonshot. So, I would say, Christoph, putting it out there, for us, as a challenge and trying to, get close to it was definitely helpful, throughout the project.
Thank you, Mathias. And Charles, you've got some comments on this as well.
Well, and I want to go back to one of the questions that was mentioned. Is there any open source project where this can be contributed? And I was thinking back of this and what we're talking about now. And in reality, I think that each time we look at open source project, there tend to be very specific and around a specific topic. And what was unique about this is the end-to-end lifecycle of all the components coming into play, right? And that is what is pretty unique, that we would stop looking at optimizing one piece of the puzzle, but the entire end-to-end lifecycle. So if there's not I'm not aware of a project like this, but if there is, or if there isn't, I think that's a real value for the industry to contribute back.
Thank you for that, Charles. Now, we've still got time to answer and address a few more questions. And Azhar, I believe you've got a question for Christoph around open source.
Thank you, Guy. Yes, Christoph, as I understand, there were 3 pillars for success of NIMS. vendor co-creation collaboration, which we discussed a lot about today on the call, brutal automation, which also we discussed briefly about on this particular call. But there's another pillar to this success, which is a horizontal telco cloud. So what we would like to learn from you is, what role did open source play in these three pillars? And was it of strategic importance to DT? And what was the experience with it?
So I think the open source was from day one on part of our, let's say, design blueprints, because always coming back to our pain points where we were somehow limited to special solutions given by, let's say, pillars which we deployed, so silos. Of course, you always get for different suppliers, they all have their different GUIs and all that stuff. So just for instance, for monitoring and visualization, we definitely said, no, we can't continue because we want to be flexible. It's a horizontal cloud, and I don't want to have different tools for different VNF suppliers. I just want to have one tool, which is at the end hiding which supplier is behind. So there were a lot of principles already from day one on when we did the design of the whole ecosystem, where we said we have to go with open source tools. And I think that brought us, let's say, a lot of benefits, because everyone knows, hey, with open source, it's mainstream. It's not an island solution. So there is a broad usage outside. You also know the suppliers already are familiar with it. So that's nothing new. That's nothing which you put out a suitcase and big surprise. So everyone knows these tools. There is a big community where we also can contribute and enhance it over time. There's a lot of software development know-how outside. So especially if you want to do some coding and adaptations, you don't have some monopolistic know-how areas. So you find a lot of people who can help, which is then, of course, cool, because if you need to scale, it's easy to onboard the colleagues. So there are a lot of advantages which we thought we will have by doing a lot of things with open source. And I think that idea completely paid off. So if you would ask, would you do it again? The answer is clear, yes.
Thank you, Christoph, and thanks, Azhar, for that question. Mathias, do you have a question as well for Christoph?
Yeah, Christoph, thanks, Guy. Christoph, we've talked a little bit about, surprises, before, and so that we had to, deal with them. And usually surprises probably a little bit more in a challenging way. Are there any, surprising benefits or values, realized in NIMS that you didn't expect or you didn't plan for?
I think, as you know, we had a lot of surprises because we were not able to copy. And we have certain areas, and the NIMS project for us, there were a lot of areas which were absolutely new for us. Telco infrastructure, completely new. Orchestration automation, completely new. That brutal automation pipeline, absolutely new. Having suppliers which just bring their software without the underlying hardware, absolutely new. Having, instead of giving the whole business to one supplier as a turnkey solution, having, let's say, 5, 6, 7 suppliers sitting in a room and then slicing the parts and dig them together, absolutely new also for us. So there were a lot of surprises, but I think we expected that. Coming back to the braveness, we expected that we will see pillars on the road, and the road might become bumpy. But I think it's not negative. So I think there are a lot of new things which came up, and I think we had challenges in that automation pipeline. We had challenges in the hardware scaling, which I didn't expect. So that was for me mainly the biggest surprise when it comes to hardware efficiency. And yes, of course, there is a clear takeaway now, because we know that we have some areas of enhancements, and of course we will take that as an additional target. It's in the parking house, but we will solve that then with the next releases. So answer your question, yes, we had a lot of challenges. Am I happy about them? Yes, I am, because otherwise it we would have probably started sleeping or get bored, and that was not the intention of that project. We want to keep everyone motivated, always under pressure, and I think there were enough challenges along the road which kept everyone awake.
I'm sure there were. Thank you, Christoph. Azhar.
Yeah, sorry, I did have a small follow-up because I think Christoph raised important points around lots of challenges and lots of new ground to break. One of the things we have heard, at least in the industry, is that telcos always look for single, vendor to actually hold accountable for. But here, you just described that there were 6 or 7 vendors, and you had a horizontal telco cloud platform. So how did you actually go about creating accountability in this type of a system?
So I guess that's a question in my direction, right?
Yeah.
So I think you know that we defined the prime integrator role from day one on, and probably as a kind of, let's say, I would say split between doing everything by our own versus giving everything to one supplier. And that was quite unique. That was also, I think, a huge challenge for Juniper, because they also acted here as a kind of a dispatcher and aligning the different groups together. But I think we were not lying back as Deutsche Telekom and saying, hey, Juniper is our prime integrator, let's see what they do. I think we also contributed a lot, especially when it comes to the automation and IMS knowledge there. So at the end, I think if you have no experiences in that ecosystem, I think it's a huge learning curve what you have to do if you want to do the integration completely by your own. I think you need at the end, in minimum, a kind of prime coordinator role, but also you need to have skills inside your company, because you have a lot of interfaces, you have a lot of probably battlefields. I don't find a better word for that. And you need to have the skill and the motivated people in all of the areas, really to be the glue as the operator, be the glue in between. And I think that was at the end, from my perspective, the reason why it worked. Because I think we as Deutsche Telekom, we have a very good relationship to all of you. And that was at the end then probably also acting Deutsche Telekom as a glue, even when Juniper had the overall prime integrator responsibility. And probably Mathias can add if he has a different point of view.
No, Christoph, you're right. There. I mean, I think also on the Juniper, it's definitely a learning, experience, there. But I think the collaboration again between your team on the Deutsche Telekom side and our team on the Juniper side, with defining clear objectives across the project, the milestones, the way we planned out to roll out the various services, what needed to come in by when. The responsibility, for, the vendors, again, combined also with, the co-creation, umbrella there. I would say all of that has helped us, push basically the project forward and make it, successful. So coming back to Azhar's question, I think, yes, having actually the prime integrator role as a coordinator, to some extent, played a pivotal role.
Thank you, Mathias. And Charles, you'd like to add some comments?
I just want to add that the accountability, I believe, came naturally. I think that everybody realized that we're all going to fail together or we're all going to win together. And I think that was the main driver for the collaboration, and understand that everything is to win here. And the collaboration and accountability, rather than being punitive, was motivated by the positive outcome that let's collaborate and make this a success. And then we all win as an industry.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Charles. Thanks. Christoph, yes.
I think Charles triggered me with one statement. I think you're absolutely right. And together with the statement from Mathias, saying that probably you can't define everything from day one on. If you do a project like that, you don't know everything. Even if we are German engineers, you can't specify everything. And that was at the end then also, I think, an explicit selection of the suppliers, because I think each of the suppliers really were hungry. Every supplier believed in that vision, and every supplier really saw and still sees, I think, his opportunity in making NIMS to a success. And that was at the end, I think, also for me, one of the I don't want to say safety net, but at the end, it was not a standard project. Of course, we can lose a lot, but also we can win a lot. And as said, we win as a team, and that's at the end the DNA what we see. So if we see that there are some topics which are probably, it could be that guy or that guy, I see a big mentality of the whole team, then someone else jumps in and say, hey, I know how to solve that, I can help you. And I think that's also one big benefit of that collaboration here in that round, which is a great partnership.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Well, I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple more questions before we have to leave. Got a viewer question in here for you, Paul. As you expand use of cloud and automation beyond NIMS, do you foresee any specific challenges to solve or changes you expect to have to make when you host other payloads, such as, say, 5G?
Yeah, thank you, Guy. Very interesting question, which actually overlaps with a lot of the work I did in one of the co-creation streams, as Christoph asked me to help co-chair one of the streams looking at hardware footprint and how that would be adapted for other types of payloads and how it could be optimized for the existing payloads in NIMS. Very interesting project. A lot of great ideas came from all of the participating vendors. What we saw was the balance between, for example, the compute constrained payloads versus networking constrained changes quite a lot, depending on whether you're running, say, a voice service or a packet core, or even some very specific sort of video type applications, which have very different requirements. It doesn't fundamentally change the hardware, it doesn't fundamentally change the software, but there are certain requirements that you have to be prepared to optimize. And so I think Christoph alluded to this earlier. There are some optimizations that can be put in to make the cloud that's been built for NIMS adapt to a wider range of different payloads going forwards, and more aggressive and painful payloads to host as well. And that was all part of the readout from that co-creation stream. A lot of good insights there, both in hardware and software ideas. So yeah, nothing dramatic. Things like smart NICs, certain software techniques, and some optimizations around which processors to use there in different environments. But put them together and you can get a very powerful solution for all sorts of network function payloads.
Thank you, Paul. And a question, well, I'm going to try and combine two questions here into one. And Christoph, I'm going to come to you and ask you this one first. Has the 3210 target we've heard about, has it already been achieved? And if not, what's the key challenge left to achieve this? And how do you go about achieving the zero part of this?
So that's a tricky question, because I think the answer is, have we achieved that vision for every use case, for every software we check in? The answer is no. But have we seen already situations where we implemented and have shown that KPIs? The answer is clear, yes. So we have seen, if we go through 3210, we have seen incremental software drops of a size really of a function, which we really deployed through the whole chain. When we had it in the lab, we deployed it in less than 3 months. We have definitely seen, coming to the one, we have definitely seen problems in the network with root cause analysis, with bug fix delivered from our suppliers, running through the pipeline and completely rolled out in front of the customer in less than 24 hours. So I think behind the one, we also can do a check in a box. And we're also doing changes already on a daytime, where usually in the past we would have done that in the night shift. So at the end, we can see that this is not that vision is achievable, and we still, of course, have some areas where we are not achieving it, or we have not achieved it yet. But with TPA, the technical process architecture stream, we are working on it with clear burn down charts, seeing where we lose the time, what is needed really to get more speed inside that piece of the whole chain, and we are getting better day by day by day by day. And that's the DNA of the team, always having that North Star in mind. And that's the way how we tackle it.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Thanks for that. Look, we have been talking here for over 60 minutes now. We're almost out of time. But before we end the show, I want to put one final question to you, Christoph. And that is, having launched and implemented this major project, what are your conclusions? How will it help Deutsche Telekom in the near future? What's your message to other telcos and the vendor community? Can you sum all this up for us?
That might be now probably highly sophisticated, hopefully not. But for me, I think the key takeaway, what everyone who's part of that session here, the key takeaway for you should be continuing like that was not an option for us. You should define a vision. You should be brave. You should never give up. And if someone tells you that's not possible, it should motivate you. Don't believe that guy. Really, it should motivate you in showing that you can make it possible. We did it. The results are touchable, as mentioned. So we are in live operations. We see first use cases where we definitely hit that vision. And I think that would not have been possible. And that's the big thank you to my team in Deutsche Telekom, who are working hard on a day by day, who believe in that vision, but also big thank you to the whole team of partners here, because you also need to have the right partners. So if there are other tier ones in here, be careful in your partner selection, because that's also one big part of the success story. And yes, follow us. I think it's worth. It works and it's fun, and I always would do it again.
Great. Thank you very much, Christoph. That is all the time we have. A very big thank you to all of our guests for taking part today in our live Q&A program. For the complete picture on NIMS, please do take a look at the other videos in this series if you haven't already done so. We have 7 interviews in total, plus 2 panel discussions. One of them is on co-design and collaboration using DevOps, and the other one's on telco cloud and end-to-end automation. They're all available to watch here on demand. For now, though, thank you for sending in your questions. Sorry we didn't get through all of them. There were a lot of questions in from our audience, which is always good to see. So from all of us here, thank you for watching and goodbye.